There is a lot we don't miss about the old days. Slavery, disease, endless warfare, the patriarchy. Okay, a lot of that is still around, I admit that. But one thing that they did have back then that we don't have now is tombs, crypts, little stone buildings to deposit our dead in coffins and just let them rot. It's good times. This is a story of one particular tomb on Barbados where instead of waiting around for the next interment, the bodies decided, apparently, to party. This is the story of the moving coffins of Barbados.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Weird World Podcast. I am Carrie.
I am Dean.
Hi, Dean.
Hi.
Coffins, huh?
Coffins, moving coffins. Now, you might remember, or you might not, back in October of 2017.
Way
long ago, we did a little like a Halloween thing. That's before we did like regular Halloween things in October. Like now, it's all about Halloween. But we did a thing about spooky stories. Remember, we told each other kind of little spooky stories, and I actually told a very brief version of this back then, but I've always felt it deserves the full treatment because it is an interesting story.
I am familiar with the story.
Oh, are you now?
So perhaps it is from the old Weird World episode.
Probably, because you're not, as we all know, even though our podcast is called Weird World, you don't really care about weird stuff at all. It's mostly...
Well, I married you, didn't I?
Oh, wow. People are going to think that A, I set that up, and B, you're mean to me. And
I think quite the opposite.
Only one of those is correct. Well... And believe it or not, the idea of moving coffins is almost like a little bit of a motif. So this is about the most famous event, the one in Barbados, and what came to be called the Chase family crypt, which you may or may not have heard of. You may have heard it here. You may have heard it elsewhere because it's been on podcasts and stories, it's on the interwebs. But oddly, again, it's not the only one. The only episode of supposedly moving coffins in the, I guess, mid-18th century in the town of Staunton in England. Apparently now it's called Stanton's Alsates near Bury St. Edmunds. I don't know what that means. I don't know if Staunton is a town. I'm not sure. But anyway, they found some coffins were disturbed on 3 different occasions in a vault belonging to a family by the name of French. In England, named French. So they opened it up and found the coffins all just disarrayed. And one of them was so heavy, it was said that 8 men had to carry it down into the crypt, but it too was tossed aside.
Wait, and these are above ground, like mausoleum kind of things?
I don't know if this is above or below ground. The one we're going to talk about, mainly the Chase crypt in Barbados, was partly below ground.
Okay.
So, I don't know. For this one, I don't know anyway. We'll hear this later, but people thought, oh, well, maybe it was flooded somehow.
Right.
Water rose it, but there were no obvious signs of that. Another incident, apparently earlier in the 19th century in Stamford, England, happened to a vault owned by the Gretford family. And then I guess the second most famous one, which you may or may not have heard of, I didn't know about this one until fairly recently. It occurred to a family called the Boxhoudens. The Boxhouden Vault, it happened in 1844 on the island of, at the time, is called Essel. Don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. And it's now called Sarema. Also don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. It's in what's now Estonia in the Baltic Sea, just off the coast of that country.
That probably explains why we've never heard of it.
You think so?
We don't get a lot of stories out of Estonia around
Still, I
here.
think they're interesting. Well, in 1844, supposedly some horses that were tethered near this vault owned by the Boxhouden family, just like freaked out. They started, whinnying and rearing up, and there was a loud crash that came from the vault, the closed, sealed vault. And I don't know if that freaked out the horses or if it happened beforehand or what, or the horses, it's not clear. Did the horses freak out and know something bad was happening in the vault and then that loud crash or vice versa? I don't know. But some of them actually fell down, supposedly. The others were able to get loose and run off into a field, galloping away as if in abject fear. Some other crashes were heard from inside the vault. Again, you don't open vaults unless you're going to put somebody in there. So somebody in the family has to die. That's the rule about vaults. I think you probably knew that.
No.
No, people don't just open them up and hang out. That's just for movies, Carrie. They're usually sealed to avoid grave robbers.
I mean, I imagine there would need to be a reason to open it up, but...
Almost always that reason is to bury somebody.
Or to check on stuff.
I don't know that that's a thing. Hi, let's go. You guys want to check out the coffins? Yeah, let's go check out the coffins. We'll unseal it, move this incredibly heavy doors.
Well,
and
if
then
somebody reports
reseal it.
hearing noise from inside,
Yeah, that's
wouldn't
true.
that be a reason to go check on
I
it?
suppose. Well, there were other loud crashes heard inside this vault in what's now Estonia on the island. And somebody did die in the family, and they opened it up. And there was, I guess, several coffins in there, and they're found just strewn and scattered around the bottom of the vault. Some were on top of each other, and I guess they weren't laid out that way. Some vaults, you will do that, but in this case, they did not. And they're found on top of each other in disarray, not laid out neatly like they're supposed to be. And 3 of the coffins inside, in this case, supposedly, were inhabited by 1, a woman of devout faith, and 2 were inhabited by very young children. Those were the only 3 that weren't said to be in disarray. So the idea from the locals, who were good Lutherans, said that, okay, maybe it's
Bad people?
demons, devil things, some kind of devil things going on, which implies that devil stuff, devil stuff. It implies that, okay, these 3, the little kids and the devout old lady, great. The rest of our family, though, they were some bad
Heathens,
people there.
yep.
Yeah, something. So that it kind of implies that, but that was one of the suppositions at the time. At the time, you're not going to make fun of that? Come on,
Nope.
Jerry. Damn, whatever. So rumors started flying there in this island, and people started saying that they felt earthquakes and tremors, and they couldn't explain it because it wasn't a place that had a lot of earthquakes ever. And they thought that just something supernatural is going on. Something's bad, So, and it's all kind of related. And then another Buxhowden died while everybody was still what are we going to do about this whole vault thing with it? All these things are going on. And a member of the family dies, and they open up the door to the crypt, and sure enough, they're just all messed up and now kind of piled on top of one another toward the middle of the crypt, which again, they're not supposed to be.
Well, I have an answer for the family about what you're going to do about it.
What?
Nothing.
Nothing?
Who cares?
You don't want to have it is a mystery, and it is kind of freaking people out, especially in
Okay.
1844.
But it doesn't affect your life.
Yeah, it does. You care about that's why you put them in tombs. Your loved ones, your ancestors. Come on, Carrie.
Nah. I mean, I don't do that.
You don't,
so.
but a lot of people do. So they were freaked out. They did. Thankfully, they did. Otherwise, if it was Carrie, we'd have no story. We just go, whatever. Shit happens, even to crypts, even to coffins.
Yeah.
What can you do about it? One of the caskets had some weird marks on it. Don't know what it meant exactly. It's not
Scratch
explained.
marks, probably demons
something
trying to
like
get
scratch marks.
into the...
Maybe. Can you imagine that? That'd be scary if you're dead. What if you weren't dead and some demon was trying to get you inside the coffin? It's a no-win situation.
Yeah.
That would suck. So I guess sometimes crypts were locked because this accounting said that they changed the locks on the crypt and they poured new lead over the locks, I guess, so you could see if they've been messed with. That's also very common. You put mortar in there. Sometimes you seal it with like your signet or something like that, just to tell
Right.
if it's broken into. Some guy named Baron de Goldenstube. He was the consistory president. I don't know what that is. Like a high official on the island, let's say. He took a couple of people from the family and they went into the crypt, and they locked it up. They sealed it. I probably put the little seals in it, and then I guess sometime later, the bodies were, laid out again, put back into the coffins. The coffins were laid out nicely. This official, took part in this process. After 3 days, they did indeed reopen it.
Okay.
Just
to check.
I think so. It sounds like it. It seems like it, though. And yet again, all of the coffins were scattered around, utter confusion. And this time, they had poured, or I guess laid a whole bunch of wood ash all over the floor to see if they can find
That's
footmarks.
a good idea.
Yeah. No footmarks. No nothing. No signs of anything.
Well, if somebody's really going in there and messing around,
Well, how could you do it?
well, okay, they laid the wood ash.
They could relay the wood ash.
Exactly.
I suppose you're right. You're absolutely right. They could, maybe someone that's getting really. You're really involved
Committed
here.
to your prank.
Very committed to this very weird prank. And again, these crypts were not easy. Presumably, they saw the leaded locks appeared to be untouched.
Yeah.
So that's a weird thing.
I don't know. Did a new business crop up? Like,
Ooh.
Crypt Security Inc.
Ooh.
offering
I like
to
that. I like that level
maybe it's them
of what's the word I'm looking for?
creating the problem so they could provide the solution.
I'm a big fan of that cynicism, Carrie. That's good. I think you know what? Yeah, that kind of thing is not just nowadays where it's universal. That was going on back then. You're right. It could have been. I don't think so though. Some were like upside down, so the heads were actually facing downward, which is not a good thing. You don't want that.
Well, it's okay if you're dead.
The lid of one coffin, I guess one of the coffins was nailed shut, whatever. One of the lids was forced open. And it is said that the shriveled right arm of that inhabitant was reaching out from the coffin. And
That's
also,
a good touch.
who was that person? He was somebody who had committed suicide by cutting his own throat with a razor. It was also said that the blood-stained razor itself was still clutched in his right hand as his...
Well, okay.
Come on. It's good storytelling. If it's an embellishment. It might be an embellishment.
That literally makes me disbelieve all of it.
Maybe that one part's an embellishment. Sure.
Just that one part.
I'll give you that. Well, but what it's brought up is the possibility that, hey, maybe this was because they did inter a suicide in hallowed ground, and that's a no-no. Pretty much all the Christian religions say, suicides, you got to bury them at a crossroads or a ditch or or like a prison.
You're
something
making
like that.
all of
No,
that up.
that's true. You're not supposed to bury suicides on hallowed ground. That's one of the punishments for committing suicide. It's one of the, not only will you not go to heaven, but you don't get buried in hallowed ground. It's trying to deter folks from committing suicide.
Okay, so what's not hallowed ground where you're allowed to bury somebody?
There's a church. This crypt was in a church. I should have said that.
So
that's hallowed ground. That's very hallowed ground.
okay, so just like some there, we have non-church related cemeteries.
We probably do, yeah.
Okay.
I don't know that that's a big thing anymore, by the way. I think we bury people who commit suicide anywhere they want to be buried.
Oh, I'll bet you there are religions that have rules against it.
There probably are. Well, there was
they got to be buried somewhere if they're going to be buried, but they probably, they're not allowed to have a funeral probably. And
well, some people think that maybe had something to do with it. Like the family was trying to sort of keep quiet that one of the family members had committed suicide.
So they buried him with the bloody razor in his hand.
Yes.
Because they were trying to keep it quiet.
Yes. Maybe that part wasn't smart on their part. They didn't think people were going to check. That's all. They didn't think he was going to pop out. And, well, at this point, the family put them back all in separate coffins and buried them separately. No longer in the tomb. They sort of abandoned the crypt, and there were no longer any disturbances. There actually apparently was an official report by this commission on the island that supposedly was written, but modern investigators have never been able to find that.
I'm assuming there are other crypts in this same
I'm sure there is.
Cemetery?
Yeah.
But this is the only one that had disturbances?
True. That tends to be the norm. The one we're going to talk now, we're going to move on to the most famous case, the moving coffins of Barbados. That also was in a churchyard with lots of crypts, and the only one that had these disturbances was the crypt that at the time belonged to the Chase family. So this is that story. Barbados, how much do you know about Barbados?
Nothing.
It's a beautiful island.
I'll bet you.
Former British colony. It was a island's economy that was based on slavery, tobacco, and cotton.
Isn't that where Rihanna's from?
Is it? She might be. Is she Barbadian?
I think so.
Okay, I'll take your word for it. So it wasn't a great place to live if you were a slave, but if you're a rich British landowner, you kicked ass.
Mm-hmm.
And this tomb was built near the town of Oistins in Barbados. It's kind of on the southern edge of Barbados. Barbados is formed a little bit, looks like maybe like a teardrop sort of, or like upside down Africa.
Okay.
And this town is on the southern edge. It's along the coast, but this churchyard, I guess it did flood sometimes, so they built it a little bit inland, but the town is on the coast. I'm not sure how far away it was from the water, but I think it wasn't like on the beaches. I think there's like bluffs between it and the ocean. So it was like 100 feet above sea level, so it wasn't like right on the water at all.
Okay.
That'll come in handy when we talk about reasons for this. So a man named James Elliott, he bought or built the vault in 1724, maybe 1727. Here's where the math gets a little sticky, because supposedly the first person to be buried in the vault was his wife, Elizabeth, in 1792. That's almost 70 years later. That seems odd to me. How old was he and how old was she?
Yeah.
I mean, was he, even if he's 20, he's 90 when he buries his wife there? That's a little weird. Other sources say he was buried there about 6 years before that. Still makes for an incredibly long time between the purchase or construction of that vault and the first people to be interred. So I'm not, the math doesn't make a ton of...
Somebody could have gotten one of the numbers wrong.
But of course, as usual, all sources say the same thing.
They all copy the same error.
They tend to, yes. A stone, it was, your typical big stone room. I'm sure there's lots of angels on top of it and things like that. It's actually, I have seen some pictures of it. It's just sort of a, flat rectangular stone room. It's about 3.5 to 4 meters deep. That's about 12-ish feet. About 3, I think it was, you stepped down some stairs and did go partially below the ground level.
Okay.
Okay. And it's about 2 or so meters wide, 6, 7 feet wide. Got it? Mm-hmm. So you have this big door. Actually, that you rolled like a big stone circle or something like that in front of a huge stone block in front of it, apparently, or some kind of a stone door. I'm not completely clear. And it was usually sealed with mortar. Again, you wanted to keep it safe. You wanted to avoid grave robbers. It wasn't something you wouldn't just open the door and go in there like Carrie thought, and Carrie still wants to do now to this day, apparently. Again, maybe Elliot was himself buried there in 1784. Maybe he wasn't. Maybe his wife Elizabeth was buried there on May 14th of 1792. It appears that there are records of her being buried there, but it's not completely clear because other reports say that no, he never actually used it in his lifetime. Not clear. So he jumped to 1807, and the tomb was bought by the Walrond family on the island of Barbados. They agreed to leave Elizabeth Elliot, who apparently, again, maybe was interred there, in the tomb, which is apparently not uncommon. It's like, no, we'll let her stay. We'll bury our family members now, but we'll let your wife stay.
Right.
Seems kind of weird, doesn't it? You don't want you mingling with some old people. They're strangers, don't even know each other. Presumably.
I mean, I would have zero problem with it, but...
You would, but I don't want the ghost of my family hanging out with ghosts they don't know. What if they don't like each other? Carrie. Some people think about these things. Shortly after they bought it in 1807, a woman named Thomasina Goddard was buried inside that tomb. You'll notice that's not the name of Walron. I don't know who she is. Presumably she was a family member, though, of this Walron family.
Lots of people in the same family have different last names.
So, I don't know, aunt, cousin, whatever. They say, yes, let's bury Thomasina in this now, what came to be called the Chase Vault, because you'll see in a second.
Also, you don't find little girls being named Thomasina anymore, do you?
No, you don't. That's so sad, isn't it? Surprised your family has it. Thomasina Ross, whatever your last name is. I forget what your maiden name is. I can't remember those things. They opened the tomb to bury Thomasina, and guess what? No body of James Elliot, no body of Elizabeth Elliot. Everybody is baffled, a little freaked out. The obvious answer is that they were never buried there in the first place. It's just not clear enough. So we don't know. So it could be a mystery that at least her body wasn't there because it appeared people thought her body was going to be there and they agreed to let her stay. When they go to bury Thomasina, even Elizabeth Elliot's body is not there, let alone her husband's.
When they bought it, they didn't check it out?
No. Again, it's a big to-do to open these things and close them up. Yeah. It's just, you're just not going to accept that.
No.
Right? Well, it is. Trust me. So they didn't just go open them all willy-nilly. All right? Then the next year in 1808, finally, the Chase family bought it, led by Thomas Chase. That's how it became to be known when all this stuff happens. It happens under the ownership of the Chase family. So you'll sometimes see it listed as the moving coffins of the Chase Vault or the Chase Vault Mystery or something like that. Okay? That's where it comes from. Like the Walron family before, they said, okay, yeah, Thomasina Goddard's in there. You know what? Let her rest. We'll let you leave her in there, but here's the cash for the vault. We own it now. We're now going to bury some Chases, all right? Thomas Chase was a beehole. He was, of course, he was a slave owner plantation. That was Carrie, it's a phrase they used in Barbados in the early 1800s. I'm using historically accurate terms here, okay? He was known to be very, very cruel. He beat up his slaves. He had a terrible temper. He terrorized his own family. He was not a very well-liked man at all. So the first Chase they buried was a little girl of 2 years old named Mary Ann Chase. Some sources have her as Anne Marie Chase, or some are like Mary Ann Marie Chase. We're not sure. Let's call her Mary Ann. We're not going to hear much more about her.
Okay.
She was interred into the now Chase family crypt. No problem. Thomasina Goddard's coffin was in there too. So you now have two. Only Thomasina
Okay.
Goddard's. Yeah, they never again. When they buried Thomasina, they didn't find any Elliots. So there's just Thomasina now and little Mary Ann. 4 years later, in 1812, Mary Ann's sister, older sister, Dorcas, also named. Great name. And a name you don't hear much anymore. Mm-hmm. Should we bring her back? Should we rename one of our kids Dorcas?
I'll bet you there are still some Dorcases in the UK.
I feel like we've called our kid Dorcases before, but not
I haven't.
for the same reason. Well, this was kind of sad because little Dorcas, I think she was, I don't know how many years old, but not very old. Let's say a young teen. I have no idea. It sounds good to me.
Just make something up.
Well, I think she was because she was apparently possibly being abused. All those sources just say abused by her evil, cruel father. And as an act of rebellion, or just because her life was miserable, she starved herself to death. So she effectively committed suicide by, I guess, going on a hunger strike and dying from it.
Wow.
They didn't have a means of force feeding, I guess, or just didn't care.
No,
If she's not going to eat, I don't give a shit. Don't let her starve. And she literally did. I'm assuming he said something like that because he was, again, as you know, a beehole.
Yeah.
So they opened in 1812 to bury Dorcas. And they found, according to one source I read, little Maria, or whatever her name was, Chase's coffin was upside down and in the opposite corner from where it had originally been placed. So it's possible these events of this Chase family vault started at that time. In other accounts, nothing was amiss when they went to bury Dorcas, so we're not sure.
I have a practical question.
Yes.
On the inside, where are the coffins put? Are they on some sort of pedestal? Are they on the ground?
In this case,
shelves?
I believe they're on the ground. Sometimes there's ledges. In this case, you're going to see later on as they have more in there, they're going to put them on the ground. And there's only room for about 3 abreast or so. And they start putting them little smaller children's coffins on top of more adult size coffins. So they are intentionally piling them at some point. I don't think that the ledges were used for, in many vaults, you would put coffins on ledges.
Yeah.
Just to create more space, but not in this case.
Okay. They'd have to be very strong ledges.
They would. Well, stone, just part of the stonework. They'd be,
Yeah.
So they'd be very strong.
Okay.
So 1 month later, after they bury Dorcas, guess who dies? Thomas Chase.
Oh.
The beehole. He died in what was the rumor had it was suicide. So who knows? But people like that don't usually commit suicide, unfortunately.
That's true.
So my guess is he was murdered by his family because he was just such a scumbag. He was terrorizing them. So either way, he was going to be buried. So they prepared his body. They opened up the vault. And then for sure, this is the first, for sure, there was complete disarray from the coffins that were in there. They were sort of tossed about on end. And there had been 3 coffins in a neat little row. Now they were just kind of scattered and a mess. And each of the caskets was upended in a different place. So they're sort of either upside down or leaning against the side of the tomb. And all of them were for sure not where they had been when they were originally put in there just a month before. So it was just fresh in the memory too.
Yeah.
Almost as if they were like, these very light. It just seemed like, how could anyone do that?
Yeah.
It's the heavy lifting and heavy labor just to even do that, even if you are some kind of hoaxer or something like that.
Well, it would have to be at least 2 or 3 people.
Easily.
Yeah.
At least that many people. For sure, it appears that Dorcas's and Mary Ann's coffins were standing upright against the wall. So I don't, Thomasina's was just sort of out of place and diagonal or something like that. So the family's just shocked. They first thought, okay, it was some kind of grave robbers and they're looking for something. That doesn't make a ton of sense. There was really nothing to steal and nothing really was stolen as far as they knew. So, but still, they rearranged them, put them nice and neat. They put Thomas's casket in there now, which by the way was lead and weighed about 240 pounds. And so now they would have had, I think the child's casket would have been on top of one of the adult's caskets. And they now have 4 caskets in there. Mm-hmm. They seal up the door. It's like a tomb door, I guess, made out of marble, very heavy stone. And they seal it, I think with mortar. Again, because now consciously, okay, if it was grave robbers, we want to see if there's any indication of somebody messing with this door.
Well, so if they seal it up with mortar, it's pretty hard to open.
They had it.
When you'd have to put somebody else in there.
You'd have to get a mason and chisel it open.
Wow.
I've been begging you to understand how a big deal it is to open these things. And you've just been, Carrie, you think it's like a little, hold on, click. I'll use the handle here and just pull that big stone door open and just check on the people in the tomb. No,
it just
Carrie,
seems silly.
It's a big deal. Well, again, because grave robbing was
a
very common thing. So their first thought is, oh, God damn it, grave robbers came in here, messed up with our coffins looking for stuff, and damn it, let's guard against that now by sealing this door up even better than we did before. So that was 1812. September 1816, there's another need to open that big marble slab door. 11-month-old Samuel Brewster Ames has died. He is going to be interred. I guess he's somebody's, I don't know.
Baby.
I know, but did you bury, I thought about this. Did you bury just your family? Was it always people in the house? Or I guess it could have been anybody in the extended family because, that would have been buried. Because this could have been a nephew or something like that,
I guess it depends on who has the deed to the mausoleum.
Well, Thomas Chase's, the Chase family did. And this obviously was not a member of the direct nuclear Chase family. It was a kid named Ames, Samuel Ames, Sammy Ames, they called him.
Well, Thomas is dead, so it's probably whoever.
But the rest of the Chase family is still around.
That's
his
what
wife,
I'm saying.
who for sure murdered him, but rightfully so.
So it's probably up to her.
I suppose. Okay. So she says, yes, bury little nephew Sammy in there. So they went to bury Samuel in there to find 4 coffins in total disarray. Completely messed with it. It's happened again. So that's seems very consistent, doesn't it? Just a short while later, in November of that same year, 1816, an adult member of the family, Samuel Brewster, so a similar name to little Sammy Ames, but Samuel Brewster, he was actually killed in a brutal slave rebellion that took place on the island in 1816, and probably deservingly because he was one of the slave holders. Slave rebellions have happened a lot more than people thought they did. In the Caribbean, they're actually not uncommon. So they did the same thing, stitched up his body with probably a lot of knife wounds and opened up the marble slab door again. Sure enough, yet again, when Samuel Brewster was to be laid in there, all the coffins in total disarray. Even if it's got a natural explanation, it's amazingly consistent.
Right.
And it's happening so often. And again, as far as any of these stories go, no other crypt in that same churchyard is being impacted in the same way.
Well, are all the other crypts similarly situated with partially underground? And
I think,
so like if it's water,
yes,
would it be happening to all of them?
I don't know, but you've got to think that if theirs was, it wouldn't be literally unique.
Right.
But it's the only one that's partially in the ground. That'd be weird.
Yeah.
So I assume somewhere. There's definitely other tombs there.
Well, unless it's like at the lowest point. You know what I mean?
It doesn't look like it.
Yeah.
I've seen some aerials of it from recent times. It just looks like a tomb among other tombs, right?
And I imagine if that was the most logical explanation, somebody has looked at all of those
for sure.
variables.
We'll get into those, of course.
Okay.
The tomb of Thomas Chase, remember, was 240 pounds and lead lined. It was very heavy. It was just difficult. Even if you're messing with people or robbing graves, it's weird that you do that. Some people at this point thought, okay, maybe it's an earthquake, but there hadn't been any earthquakes. There's a whole time there hadn't been earthquakes. Earthquakes in Barbados are very rare.
It would have to be a huge earthquake.
A very severe one, to knock them around. This is the point, though, in about 1816, where the public really starts going, what's going on here? It became a big story on the island, and people were freaking out a little bit and wondering what was happening. And then you started hearing kind of natural embellishments. People started talking about, like, they heard shrieks from within the tomb, or their horses would ride by and be kind of spooked from passing near that particular crypt. So, you already see that kind of process happening, which kind of happens in all these kinds of stories, but it was happening as early as 1816. So another 3 years go by, 1819, the vault is opened yet again, this time for another Thomasina Clark, apparently a member of the Chase extended family. She was going to be buried in a wooden coffin, but again, they open it up in 1819, and then all the coffins are tossed around in complete disarray. If you accept that it started when they opened the casket to inter Thomas Chase after Dorcas, so between Dorcas and Thomas Chase, I think if my count right, between 1812 and 1818, that makes 4 events where they'd opened the tomb and found total disarray from all the coffins inside.
I was going to say, aren't they starting to run out of room?
They're by this point, they're just piling them on top of each other.
Yeah.
So you can do that with 6 coffins, 3 on the bottom, 3 on top. But yeah, no, it's getting a little tight in there. So this is getting crazy. Sometimes they were damaged too. One of the coffins had broken corners. Sometimes they were partially open. In one of the cases, I don't know which one it was, Thomasina Goddard's skeleton was said to be hanging out.
Ooh.
And so you started getting, like, again, supernatural things like spiritual, ghost or something like that.
Yeah.
Kind of rumors on the island, though. Every time they did this, they would put the vaults, the coffins rather, back into their normal location. I'm going to show you a picture now that shows kind of a rendering of it. You see how nice and neat they were on the left. Oops. We'll put this on our social media. Carrie's looking at it now. You see that, so they're kind of stacked on each other, aren't they? And then to the right, you see the picture there, and they're just all disturbed, all tossed about. I'm sure that's not perfectly to scale.
No.
But and I take that back. What I said earlier, there are, if this is correct, if this is accurate, there are no ledges at all. But they're like some are on top of each other, but they weren't the ones that were on top of each other before, and some are leaned against the back or sides of the vault, which they were all laying nice and neat before. So,
which even if it was some grave robbers or whatever, they wouldn't be standing them up like that.
Why would they?
Yeah.
And the door, it was said that the door required 6 or 7 men to open it. And again, someone with a hammer and chisel had to get through the mortar first, and then multiple men had to push it open, and then multiple people would have to go inside and toss them around for some reason.
I mean, it would probably take like a day or two just to get it open, right? I mean, it would take a long time.
No, probably a few hours. It wouldn't take a day or two. But it's still, it would take a while.
Yeah.
And you've got to think by this point, I'm sure churchyards are fairly lonely places at night, but still, you think people would be sort of aware and wary of something messing around with that particular vault.
And it wouldn't be silent.
No,
it would be a little noisy.
And so apparently, I don't know if it's before this. It's hard to say because the governor of the island is going to get involved here in a minute. But it's some sources have sand being laying across the floor prior to these events in 1819 to see, again, any footprints or any signs that something had happened, even water. I don't see how water raising sand would show that. I think the sand would just settle back down onto the floor. You'll hear when you read these, if you read these things in the lit, you will often read like, oh, but there's the sand looked untouched. There's no sign that any water activity had happened. How would you know that from sand? That doesn't make any sense to me.
I would think it would still be just if
you think so?
If there's enough sloshing around to slosh around hundreds of pounds of coffins, then the sand isn't going to look exactly like it.
But
it's not going to be.
I mean, if they put a nice one of those cool Southwest Native American designs into the sand,
they probably didn't do that.
I'm assuming they did not.
Not a lot of Native Americans to show them those designs.
Not many in 1819 Barbados.
Yeah.
Very few.
No, I think it would be disturbed and you would see it.
I guess so. I don't know. I'm not 100% positive on that. So
I am 100%.
100%, not 110 though.
Dean, think about it.
But not 110.
Well, because that's not a thing. You can't be 110.
Yeah, but it indicates that you're really sure of it.
You
when you say
can be a billion%
impossible.
positive.
I think I'm a billion% positive. I'm not sure.
Everybody else who lives in the real world.
So a guy named Sir Stapleton Cotton, he was also the Baron Combermere. He was both great names, by the way. He had 2 awesome names. He was a governor of Barbados at the time, and he said, what's going on? I'm going to look into this myself. So in July of 1819, when they went to bury Thomasina Clark, he and his wife went there to witness it as the tomb was being opened, and they were there when they saw all the coffins strewn about and all messed with, right? So Mrs. Combermere, or we should be Mrs. Stapleton, I'm not a billion% positive on how that works. She wrote in her diary about this, and we have her diary. She wrote, quote, "In my husband's presence, every part of the floor was sounded to ascertain that no subterranean passage or entrance was concealed. It was found to be perfectly firm and solid. No crack was even apparent," end quote. So they were smart about this. They said, okay, someone get into some secret tunnel or something like that. But they had professionals going like tap, 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 and they found nothing seemed hollow. Again, it was the floor of it went partially underground. What?
Professionals going tap, tap, tap,
These
tap.
are professional tap, tap, tappers, Gary. Okay? There are professionals. That's a thing. That was an occupation back then. But I'm a stone tapper to find if there's any subterranean tunnels or entrances. So, from her diary, quote, "The walls, when examined, proved to be perfectly secure. No fracture was visible, and the sides, together with the roof and flooring, presented a structure so solid as if formed of entire slabs of stone." Later she wrote, "The floor was sanded with fine white sand in the presence of Lord Combermere and the assembled crowd. The door was slid into its wonted position, and with the utmost care, the new mortar was laid on. When the masons had completed their task, the governor made several impressions in the mixture with his own seal, and many of those attended added various private marks in the wet mortar," end quote. So they're going, okay, we're going to know if someone, we've eliminated any possibility that they're getting in any other way, underground, through a secret tunnel, through the walls, whatever, under the floor. They can't do that. Now we've sealed it. We've put my seal in there. Only I have that. These other folks have done so. One guy for sure put his butt cheeks in the mortar, I'm assuming, at the time. But still, that was the various marks that were mentioned. So after about 9 months, I guess Lord Combermere said, "I'm not waiting any longer for somebody from your family to die. We're going to go and open that thing and see what's going on." So it's April 18th, 1820.
He's a rule breaker.
He is. He's a little bit, but, he's got to know. And so they go down there into the churchyard, and this time hundreds of people. It's just a mob scene surrounding this tomb as they get a mason to start breaking through the mortar, and have a bunch of burly guys there to move this big marble slab of a door. He ordered the work to be done. After, quote, "a great deal of effort, the slab finally was moved." They were barely able to move it. They actually had to do it just barely enough to let someone squeeze in. It was, I don't know, did it get heavier or did they get weaker? I'm not positive, but that's the story. And to everyone's surprise, question mark, the coffins were completely messed up again these 9 months later, with no evidence of any disturbance whatsoever to his marks or to the mortar itself. Coffins in complete disarray again. In fact, one of the coffins, one of the babies, one of the children, had been thrown so violently against the wall that it had a deep gash in the coffin itself, which seems a little weird. So that was it for Lord Combermere. He said, I'm having no more of this. We're not using this tomb is off limits. I'm sure the family agreed. Yeah, forget it. So they put them all in separate coffins again, and they buried them in the old-fashioned way, and the tomb was left unused and the door aside. They got the door completely aside and left wide open.
Right.
And obviously there's no further disturbances, so there's nothing in there to disturb, but it remained empty and unsealed. Until this day, it still exists. We'll put some pictures of the tomb on our social media.
You know what I would do?
What?
Put a bunch of empty coffins in there and see what happens.
Ooh, why?
Just for funsies.
Oh, for funsies, yeah. Okay, sure. People thought about that in the 1820s. You know what, guys? For funsies, let's put some empty coffins there. Let's tempt fate.
Yeah.
Let's seal it up.
Because then if it's not grave robbers, if it's not, you know what I mean, then it wouldn't happen.
Would you put mannequins in the coffins just to fool spirits or something like that?
No.
Just completely empty. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Or like pass around rumors that, I heard they buried that last one with diamonds just to maybe tempt people.
No, because we already determined we didn't think it was grave robbers.
All right. So the first thing you want to ask is, did this really happen? And these people exist. There's records of all of these people. There's records of them being buried. There's records of this tomb and the purchase of this tomb and being. So it appears this is a real thing. At least these people are for sure real. So something like this may have happened. I'll talk a little bit about the sources for it in just a second. But first, I want to talk about, what do you think is happening here? And you start at the supernatural stuff, because they did think about this. There was like some kind of unhappy spirit. Like the natives had, I guess, something called duppies, which was a word for evil spirits, and they rumored that the evil spirits were doing this.
They need a less cute name if it's really evil spirits.
Duppies is a great name.
Yeah, that's
they don't sound
cute.
very evil, do they?
No.
Oh my God, no, a duppy. No, no, that doesn't seem scary. It's like, oh my God, it's so cute. Is it a duppy? Oh, that's adorable. Your mother so sucks that smell. That's a classic line. It was also, there was rumors that it had something to do with the previous dead of the families that didn't want Thomas Chase. Remember the beehole? Like those other people already in there?
Right.
Rebelled. The spirits of those dead people rebelled against him because he's a dick, being buried in amongst them. So it was like, I guess, a ghost fight, like a ghost war kind of thing, maybe. That was one of the thoughts at the time. A woman named Elizabeth Daly, she wrote a letter about this, and she said, quote, many people have been inclined to attribute them to poltergeists or other supernatural agencies, end quote. I didn't know the word poltergeist was even, and I don't know how much, you know what, I forgot. She wrote later, but I'm pretty sure it's still in the 1800s when she wrote that. And I thought that was fairly, it means noisy ghost in German, but I didn't know that it was 19th century. I'm not sure. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle later on would he was interested in this. He heard about it.
I'm sure he was.
Of course he was. He was a big spiritualist, and he actually thought of two things. One, he thought, oh, well, maybe it's because Thomas and Dorcas both committed suicide that their bodies were cursed, like a lot of folks think about that, and that caused it somehow. But he also posited that maybe it was something to do with animal magnetism. Not a billion% sure what he means by that.
Yeah, me neither.
That's Arthur. Again, sad descent into stupidity in the later part of his life. Others still say, okay, grave robbers. That's a possibility. It seems preposterous.
But why just that one?
Why just that one? And why do what they did? Well, you'd force open the coffin lids only where they are. You might take once they're being stacked. Remember, at first they weren't. Yeah. But once they've been stacked, you take the baby coffin off and lay it aside somewhere. You don't toss everything around. Yeah. Even the really big, heavy ones. And of course, something similar to that, but not exactly the same, is hoaxers. Yeah. Somebody is messing with the family for some reason. But oh my God.
That's a long-term hoax.
Very long-term, tremendous amount of commitment. A significant amount of manpower to do that. So I don't know. There's still earthquakes, but again, as we talked about, there were no, during this entire period from 1812 to 1820 that these things were happening, there was no any kind of significant earthquake recorded on the island of Barbados. So that seems highly unlikely. And of course, then there is the most likely thing, which is water. Some form of flooding. Again, this is about, it was pretty deep. One thing I read said it was 3.7 meters deep, but I think that means from floor to ceiling. I think, and it was but it was still it did go below ground level, right? For sure. And remember, it's a sealed casket, so if a lot of water is getting in there, it could float these coffins, and that like half the days of the year. Barbados gets rain. It's a very wet and a very green island. It gets tremendous amounts of rainfall. So it's
So how is the water getting in? Through the ground?
It would have to. Wouldn't it? Because it would have to seep in somehow through the ground. And it's not, which is not impossible because they're tapping, the professional tappers, as we know about. Right. We're doing their thing, but water can get through anything. Water, it would have to be coming from the sides and then going and seeping in through I would think the walls or where they were, intersected with the ground and seeping in and then flooding the part of the tomb that was below ground level, maybe even a little higher than that because the stone around above ground could have been sealing it in. And, the whole sand thing, I know you disagree with me, but I don't think you would notice the sand.
Well, I think at some point they would there would be evidence of water?
Like what?
I don't know.
The closest was 1 month, and if it's possible, which was Thomas after Dorcas, and it's not clear that when they opened it for him, anything was amiss. Because one person said there was, but most persons say there wasn't. So the first one was after Thomas had been put in, and what later that possibly the first disarray actually occurred. So, and those were all at that point on, they were at least many months or years apart from one another.
Yeah.
These events.
I don't know. It just seems like if it is water, why just that one?
That is weird too. I agree with that. That's very strange. And for it to happen all the time like that, once in a while.
Maybe it was the least watertight.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe some of the other ones were more well constructed. Maybe they were, more constructed of a single piece of
or just the slabs were better connected. Who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's true. Or it just had, maybe it just took one really significant leak or ingress for the water that they didn't find. The professional tappers didn't find. Tap, 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 tap. They didn't notice that.
Well,
that's all it would take.
They weren't looking for leaks for water.
They weren't.
They were looking for secret passages.
Exactly.
And stuff, so
or
very
some
different.
kind of a fissure.
Tap, tap, tap is not going to show you a leak.
Tap, tap, tap did not show that leak. So, so the water thing holds the most water.
Yeah. I mean, that to me is the most plausible.
But you'd have to agree that the whole sand thing is going to have to settle back and look more or less like they laid it.
But also, who knows? I mean, who knows?
True.
What, that's a very subjective measure.
Yes. The other main explanation for this is that it more or less effectively didn't happen.
Yeah.
So the Skeptic magazine has a guy named Joe Nickel, we've probably quoted before, and Benjamin Bradford. He's a folklorist, and they do, they're kind of professional skeptics, essentially. And they did an article for this, and they said that essentially that there were multiple sources out there. It was quoted in like diaries and people's books. Some guy in 1833 called Transatlantic Voyages who had been to Barbados. He talked about it happening, and other people wrote about it in books in 1848, et cetera, right? And of course, they found the diaries. But their argument was that it all really goes back to one guy. He was the church deacon or some church official in that church, and he would tell stories about this. And it sounds like the 1820s. He started telling these stories, and according to their investigation, these other sources appeared to them to go back to his anecdotal stories told in 1820 that then kind of spread out from the island and got into a variety of sources. Not many, but 4 or 5 different sources. The basic elements of the story kind of remain the same. And they even, I guess one of them went to, I think Radford, he went there in 2011 to Barbados and checked out the tomb. And he said, I didn't see any signs of any damage to the sides of the tomb from coffins being strewn around. I'm not sure that you would see that. I don't know how, I don't think that's all that telling in my mind.
Well, you said some of them, the corners were smashed.
They were.
And the one had a big gash in it.
I know. I know. But it's also been, by that time it had been almost 200 years.
Yeah.
So who knows what anybody could have, if any of those marks would still remain or be in any way obvious to that site. So he blamed it on, they said essentially they thought it was like Masonic, as in Freemason, allegory. I guess in Freemason mythology, there's like a secret vault, and he said that there was a lot of, sort of similarities to Freemason, and kind of just like Freemason verbiage, almost like code words that other Freemasons reading about or hearing about the story would be able to identify, and these symbols and phrases to Freemasons. He said that it was an allegory constructed by Masonic symbols, including the sound of a hammer used to certify the solidity of the vault's walls, the arched ceiling that represented the Royal Arch degree in Freemasonry, and this whole idea of secret vault, which is apparently part of Freemasonry. And of course, the men who sealed the door with cement were called Masons, because guess what? They were. I think the Mason angle of their argument is very
silly.
Weak.
Yeah.
It's kind of dumb. You know why there's a hammer? Because you needed a hammer to chisel out the mortar. You know why there was masons involved? Because this was a stone tomb, and at this time, you needed a stonemason to do anything with stone buildings.
But also, it's not secret if it's right there in the middle of the cemetery
It's really
or
not.
whatever.
No, it's not. And I don't know. Maybe there's a secret vault thing, but so what?
Yeah.
So now it's possible. The idea that these sources are really very confused. That goes back to a guy named Andrew Lang. He was a Scottish researcher who in 1907 wrote a book or did lectures on this, and he made that argument before the Skeptical Inquirer guys did, that, hey, it doesn't look like there's more than one original source to this, and they all kind of derive from him.
Right.
His name was
Yeah.
Orden or something like that. So that's possible, but I don't know. I mean, actually, the skeptical versions of this or attacks on this aren't super persuasive to me.
Really?
No, they're not.
That's my number one, that it never happened. It's just a story.
They're like, they say things like, oh, there was no local newspaper accounts of this. Really? You think you're going to find 1812 and 1820 newspaper accounts in Barbados of this? If there were stories about this being told by this deacon or whatever he was in 1820s, something along those lines happened, or something. Maybe he's embellishing it, but something along that line, I think, almost certainly happened. There's also the diary from the governor's wife that she's talking about it. So she's saying, we went there and he and I were there and we saw these coffins in disarray and we put the sand down and it was like that again 9 months later.
Who reported on the diary?
So you have to make up that diary effectively.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not impossible.
There are a million stories with a million made
I know.
up details.
That's true. I mean, that might be true. To me, it's not a slam dunk.
Well,
That something along these lines didn't happen. At some point, there were multiple disturbances of coffins in these people's vault. What happens, I've talked about this 100 times, right? These accretions. And when you're telling a story where the point of the story is to be spooky and weird, you layer on and embellish in ways that make it A, spookier and weirder, and B, less explicable, less
Right.
able to understand. In the same way that if you're telling a story about whatever heroism, you make the deeds of the hero, you exaggerate the deeds of the hero, you exaggerate his opponents, et cetera, et cetera. Or if it's a romantic story or a religious allegory, you embellish it to make those points of the story enhanced. In the same way you do it with all these paranormal stories, you embellish them to make the paranormal aspects of it enhanced. I fully agree that could and almost certainly did happen in this, but that there was some spark and some anomalous event that happened to invent it, to manufacture it, I think it's true. Like they say that, remember the Estonian story I told you that took place in 1844? They say, oh, this was just stolen from the Estonian story. You did notice, I mean, maybe you did notice now that you've heard both stories, there were a lot of similarities.
Yeah.
That makes no sense to me. This was for sure.
No,
The one we know now we don't know her diary because that was quoted by someone else and we don't have it in existence. But we do have the 1833 book that's by I can't remember his name, but he wrote a book called Transatlantic Voyages. Kind of a memoir, and he talked about this in that. That was 11 years before this Estonian story allegedly happened. So that doesn't make any sense. It wasn't derived from the Estonian event. If anything,
The other way around.
birth
Yeah.
to the Estonian event. I don't know. So I don't know. I think there are some weaknesses in the excuses for it, and I think there's at least enough evidence to say there was a kernel of something there that happened in Barbados in 1812 to 1820 or thereabouts. What do you think?
Well, I've already told you. My number one is that it never happened.
know.
It was just a story. My number two is it's some logical, explainable natural phenomenon like water.
I think it's water.
Yeah.
If I had to say, here's the one thing I think it is, I think something happened. I think some coffins were moved. But were they really gouged? No. That was an
Yeah,
embellishment.
exactly.
Were there, and
Yes.
so that would explain not seeing the inside of the tomb currently looking like it had coffins thrown against it, because that was an embellishment. But the idea that these coffins were found in disarray and not neatly lined up in a row,
Yeah.
I think happened.
Yeah.
But I think it's probably something to do with water.
And to what degree was the actual disarray?
Yeah.
That part, the amount of disarray could be greatly exaggerated as well.
The pictures you see, by the way, of the before and after, those are also the same pictures I noticed were used to illustrate the Estonian case.
Oh.
That's very suspicious.
Well, where did those come from?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Everything
So see-
says, I swear to God, it says source internet. I'm not making that up. If you
Okay.
source the internet,
So-
you haven't done a good job. So I don't know. I would source it and say these various internet stories, but that's the same thing as saying source the internet. I don't know where it's from.
Yeah.
And I'm going to admit I don't know where it's from.
I mean, they don't look like they're really actual sketches done at the time.
They don't look contemporaneous at all.
No.
They look very bold line. They don't look
Yes.
real. My guess is somebody illustrated it for their story of this
Exactly.
in relatively
Yeah.
modern times.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we don't know what it really looked like, but I think something was there. There was some probably water-based event that floated, and you can float coffins. They are buoyant, absolutely.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and it floated the coffins, and they settled in a way that was looked disturbed, and probably some embellishments and some details were added on later on.
Yeah.
That's my thoughts.
Yeah.
Anything else?
No.
All right. That was the story of the moving coffins of Barbados. We hope you enjoyed that.
I think it would be weirder. It'd be a better story if the moving coffins just moved around and stayed very neat and orderly.
Well,
But like they all
then you
just-
wouldn't know that they'd been moved.
No, you would, because we know we put Thomasina here, and we put baby, what's his name here, and we put the bee hole here.
Wow.
And then if they're all just like rotated every time you go in there,
That would be interesting.
that would be.
That would. I wonder if you noticed though. Did we put was Thomasina lower left? I don't. What if you just like go? No, she must not have been. I don't know. I don't know if you'd even notice.
No, they would absolutely
I don't
notice.
think so, Carrie. Carrie, you're the one who thought that
If
they
they're
just
your loved ones, you know where they're supposed to be. In fact, you probably have a sketch of it.
Okay. I am fairly sure no one had a sketch of this.
I'll bet they did.
Okay, maybe. I'll take your word for it. Okay, well, that was it. I hope you enjoyed this little tale of the supernatural ? Until next time.
Thank you for listening.